Right now, AI is really glorified pattern matching, but it's really, really good at pattern matching. And computers have been good at pattern matching for a long time. This is not new. We've been doing it since the 60s or even before. But what's happening is the AI is doing pattern matching on things that it hasn't seen before.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Dev Interrupted. I'm your host, Dan Lyons, and today I'm joined by Emad Elwany, CTO and co-founder at Lexion. Emad, thanks for joining us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome to have you on. Also, congratulations. So you did an $11 million Series A funding round last year, right?
That's right.
That's really, really cool. So we'll get into that a bit. Also, we were talking pre-pod. You let me know that you are from or were growing up in Egypt.
That's correct. Alexandria, Egypt, on the North Coast, a very beautiful city.
What was that like?
It was great. I loved growing up there. It's a very cosmopolitan city. It's very old. It's been around for a couple of thousand years. So you can see a lot of interesting stuff even on your way to college or work. Have a lot of family and friends still there. Go there at least once a year. It's a nice part of the world.
Yeah. When did you move over to the US?
I came into the US a few times in around 2008 and 2009. I moved here permanently in 2010 and have been here ever since.
Yeah, I want to ask you a little bit about your background and, professional career, software engineering, doing interesting things with AI. You're a co-founder. So walk us through kind of your professional journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I started initially in academia. So I went to undergrad for computer engineering, which I enjoyed very much. And then I started to join industry for a while after graduation. I had to choose between continuing in academia or going into industry, but I wanted to try industry out for a while. So I joined Microsoft. And while working at Microsoft, where I ended up staying for a long time, around 8 or 9 years, I went back to grad school part-time and ended up getting my master's in computer science at Stanford. And then after these 8 years, I decided that I want to try startups. So the Paul Allen Institute is a very, very famous AI institute here in Seattle. They had a great incubator program that helped people like me coming with big tech experience and some academia experience to start companies in the AI space. That's where I joined. I joined them in 2018 and I met my co-founders there. We tinkered a bit, we had some ideas, and we ended up building what's now Lexion. It's been a very exciting journey. At Microsoft, my experience spanned many teams. So I worked for a bit in search and paid search. I worked in social computing. I worked in NLP and natural language processing and AI, conversational AI. I've really worked on a lot of great teams and met some of the greatest people of my career there. And I've taken all this knowledge into Lexion and enjoying now working on using AI to solve business problems.
That's actually a really interesting background. You got your master's at Stanford, right?
Correct. Yes.
Do you think it was worth it to get your master? You did it in computer science?
I did. It absolutely was. Just because it's in our field, it's important to be on top of things and the latest research, and Stanford is really good at that. Also, the community there is amazing, from the teaching staff to the student body and just everybody there. There's just this vibrant energy. And everybody's trying to do great things, and they inspire you, and you learn a lot of great tools, and it just helps shape you as an well-rounded software engineer and AI practitioner. So definitely was worth it for me.
Then you did some stuff with Microsoft for a while, big company. Then you mentioned you did the incubator program, startup incubator. I actually never did that. We had an opportunity to do it, but we actually passed on it. What was the incubator like for you?
I think it's a really good transitioning tool for somebody who wants to get into startups, what doesn't want necessarily all the huge risks that come with a startup. So some people do it the hardcore way and go start a company in a garage. I had a family at the time and a lot of obligations, and it wasn't I was a little risk averse. So the incubator is a good balance, right? So you're still in an environment, you have a community, you can try it out and then go back to a normal job if you want to. But if you strike some good idea, then it allows you to go pursue that.
And you actually met your founders there, your co-founders for Lexion?
Yeah, both of them. Yeah, Gaurav Oberoi, who was a serial entrepreneur, and James, who's also worked in many startups before.
Okay, let's talk about Lexion. What happened to start Lexion? What's the idea? What's it all about?
So we went into the I went to the incubator with an open mind. My experience was in natural language processing. So I was gravitating towards it, but I was pretty open. And James and Gaurav and I tried a few different ideas. We ended up building as a company that was different. And we got like a multi-million-dollar contract in a very different space, but then decided that it's not like we're not passionate about pursuing it. So we handed it over to other very capable folks and decided to switch gears to something new. And then due to my experience in document understanding and language understanding, I was looking closely at use cases there. And we ended up starting a company that was around generic document intelligence. And then over time, we started looking for great use cases for this doc intelligence technology. We tried it in many domains. We got success in multiple domains, but there was very obviously something very worthwhile pursuing in legal. And that's where we started and kept going.
Yeah. So you went down kind of this, let's help legal people work through contracts faster using AI, something like that. Does that sound about right? Okay.
Absolutely.
And you landed your Series A last year. You're the CTO of the company. You're a co-founder. What is it like to be a CTO in a pre-Series A company? Like, what were you doing? What was your roles and responsibilities?
Good question. It's very different. It changes a lot. Pre-Series A, I was doing the job that I'm supposed to be doing. So like driving the technical strategy and doing like hiring and building product and writing code. But I was also doing a lot of like operations work and recruiting, HR, administrative, IT, wearing many, many hats. I think after Series A, I got a chance that we now have the resources to get people who are specialized and are probably a lot better than me at doing these jobs. And I started to have like more focus on like working closer to the tech and focus on growing teams and cultures and tools and just helping set the strategy of the technology for the company.
Okay. So AI, it's kind of a buzzword. Like how does it relate to Lexion and then your role specifically?
It absolutely is. So we are like AI first company. We wrote like a lot of code that's just AI even before writing the actual user facing application. We knew we had a vision, so we were making a gamble and taking a bet on the technology, but we invested a lot in just generic document understanding platforms and built a lot of tooling around like annotation, building models, deploying them, testing them, etc. before going to the user-facing product. Now we have a lot more around the AI from beautiful applications and a lot of experiences on top, but the AI is still very much ingrained into everything in the product and the way we think about all the experiences we offer.
When you talk about AI to like a common folk, your friends or family, how do you describe like what is AI to you when you're talking to regular people?
Yeah, I always start by just telling them it's not like you see in the movies or the media. It's not singularity and Skynet and sentient machines. We're pretty far from that. Maybe we'll get there, maybe not. The question is still unanswered. But right now, AI is really glorified pattern matching, but it's really, really good at pattern matching. And computers have been good at pattern matching for a long time. This is not new. We've been doing it since the 60s or even before. But what's happening is the AI is doing general matching on patterns, pattern matching on things that it hasn't seen before. This is the beauty of AI. You can show it like some examples and then it will extrapolate and go further to other areas that you never expected. So it's still kind of very much as a tool and not like something that is science fiction-y, but it's a very useful tool.
Yeah. And, sometimes people are saying, oh, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my job to a computer. Maybe even when you're talking with your customers, I don't know, maybe they're afraid the legal team, they won't need me and stuff like that. Like, how do you respond to that type of talk?
I tell them there's definitely a small subset of jobs that will be heavily impacted by AI. And this is not new. I mean, automation has been replacing jobs for a very long time with the Industrial Revolution and beyond. This is not a new thing. It's just that AI is going after kind of information work instead of just like other kinds of jobs. However, AI is still very much in its nascent days and very much an assistive tool. It's really good at tackling problems that are repetitive and mundane. And it's not just good at innovation or creativity or things that require deep critical thinking. So my answer to people is it's not going to replace lawyers and doctors. It'll help lawyers and doctors be better at their job and more efficient. So now the doctor can like review hundreds of images of CT scans instead of just a few dozen and derive conclusions quicker, but they will still need to look at them. We're going to need these roles. For the roles that are kind of can go away with AI, they're honestly roles that I think are not a good way for humans to spend human capital. Probably people should pursue different careers where they can kind of like do more interesting work. So I would encourage people to kind of like look where we will be in 10 years, what AI is going to replace, and then pursue careers that are working alongside the AI, or maybe help the AI, build the AI as well, because there's going to be a huge demand in that space.
When you talk about AI with your colleagues, what are the kinds of things you talk about? I think you told our producer there've been a lot of breakthroughs in AI in the past 5 years. Like, what's going on in the industry now?
Yeah, so there are a couple of questions here. So to answer your first question about how I talk about AI with my colleagues, I talk about business value. So as a company, at the end of the day, we're there to solve customer problems and create value, right? So I encourage the whole team to always ask themselves, like, why am I building this machine learning model? Building AI for the sake of AI is not a good goal. You have to tie it to a good business case, and you have to pick the right problem where the accuracy of your model will be able to solve the problem. Because not every AI model is the same. Some of them are at 50% accuracy, other at 99% accuracy. And they're both valuable if applied to the right problem. So I always encourage people to start with the problem. And then I also encourage them to think a little beyond today, because if you think of AI, like OCR is AI, right? Optical character recognition. 2 decades ago, OCR was very cool. It was you can make a lot of money building OCR solution. You could charge dollars per page. Now you charge anybody who can do OCR at the cost of fractions of a cent. So it became very commoditized. Today, we're at that stage with document understanding. It's like the cool thing. You're solving a lot of new problems. You can charge a lot of money for it. But in 10 years, it's going to get commoditized, right? So you need to go one level up the pyramid of value and offer a lot of experiences on top of it to protect your moat and to continue to be relevant. That's kind of the message I try to share with my team. And then I can talk about kind of some of the recent breakthroughs if you're interested in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What's going on?
There's been a lot going on. I'm going to pick 3 because I don't want to talk about this for hours and hours, even though I could. The 3 that kind of made our lives easier and give us a lot of impact at Lexion. I'll start with unsupervised learning. So traditionally, when you're building machine learning models, you use something called supervised learning, where you need armies of human annotators going at every example in tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands and give it the right label. So look at an image of a cat, say this is a cat. Look at an image of a dog, say this is a dog. It's very time consuming and expensive. With unsupervised learning, you got rid of a lot of that because machines became good at understanding data without labels. So if a computer looks at a lot of text and then notices that every time there's a person's name and then something and then an action, it's very frequent that this something is a job title. So it can say something like Elizabeth, the queen, honored the knight. Mark, the doctor, cured the patient. So from just this pattern matching without anybody saying that queen and doctor are job descriptions or job titles, the machine can infer that. Now take this and apply it on hundreds of thousands of constructs that the machine can learn unsupervised, and you can build very powerful things with that. The second area that there's been a huge breakthrough is transfer learning. And transfer learning is the tool that allows you to train a model for task A or to solve problem A, and then invest in it a lot, maybe months, maybe years. And then you have it working well. Now you're going to solve problem B. Instead of starting from scratch and working for months and years, now you can take all your learnings or most of your learnings from A, plug it into B, do a little bit of extra work, maybe days or just weeks tops, and then solve problem B. This has been an instrumental, a huge change in the way we operate machine learning. And it allows us to now build hundreds of models in the span of a year instead of just 1 or 2. The third and last area I think that we use a lot and are big believers in at Lexion is weak supervision. So tying to both, it kind of helps you use the intersection of these 2 things. Instead of having an army of humans and a huge annotation team go and label data, as I mentioned, instead, you can have the human expert try to instill their knowledge in a rule or a labeling function, as they call it in the literature. So now I'm an expert. Instead of going and labeling these 10 sentences as person, job description, action, I can then say, hey, computer, whenever there's a person name and then something and then the action, this something is actually probably a job title. It's not going to be always accurate. There's going to be examples where this doesn't work. But if it works 80 or 90% of the time, then we can go and label hundreds of thousands of examples in one swoop. And we have tools that allow us to take these labeling functions and then use the ones that are good and drop the ones that are bad and build models much faster. These are the three I would pick just because they influence us so much, but there's probably a lot more there.
That's really cool. I don't even know if this is a thing or not, but I know, I forget whose law it was. It was something with like computers are processing X amount faster every year. Chips are running faster and faster and faster. Is there anything in AI, a similar law of like new models can be created this much faster every year? Did anyone talk about something like that?
100%. I mean, now, and because of open source and academia, now like a company maybe like Google or like some of the research institution will like literally train a model for months on their very expensive hardware.
Yeah.
And then put it out as open source. Anybody can download it on their MacBook laptop, write a few lines of code on top, and then build a model in a day that's like impressively good. So for sure, we're seeing the same kind of evolution there. And it's paired this with advancement in computer architectures. So like with GPUs and ASICs chips and TPUs that allow you to train even faster, you're now able to do things that literally would have taken years in the 90s to take like half a day today. And it's going to keep getting faster as well as we go.
Where do you think just regular, I guess, people or consumers are impacted most by AI? Is it like what ads we get served, or like I feel like it's always something to make money off of us. Like where do you think, like, what is the biggest impact of AI on regular people's lives today?
A good question. It's very ubiquitous. People, ads is unfortunately one of them. Oren Etzioni, I think CEO of AI2, says this sentence, like the brightest minds of our generation are working on showing more ads, which is...
That's the saddest thing ever. Yeah. It's like really true though, I think. Yeah.
It is, but it's everywhere. Like Siri, when you're talking to Alexa, when you are basically traveling and like getting your face scanned at the border, when you are kind of like searching for something on Google and getting, oh, that's Alexa. She heard her name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really ingrained in everything you do, and people just don't notice it. And I think this is a good thing because you don't have it to be shiny as long as it's adding value. That's what matters.
Yeah, I mean, it might transition, well here. So as the CTO, how do you talk about AI to the business side of your company?
I try to kind of, it's not different from what I talk to the technical, the engineering and product teams. It's kind of all gets back to value, except with our business side, I try to work with them to explain the value we're creating to the customer. And to also not overpromise, to be very realistic in saying what AI is good at and what it's not good at, so that people don't come with the wrong expectations. So AI is gonna allow our customers to find things faster. So like if instead of like reading a 50-page contract in a PDF to answer a simple question, let's say the salesperson asks the general counsel, do we have an active NDA with Acme Inc.? Now the general counsel will have to go search for the right contract, read it, figure out if it's active or not, and then answer. With a tool like Lexion, they literally can just look it up in 1 second, just type Acme Inc. and see, oh, it's active. Or they can even tell the salesperson, go look it up in Lexion, it's right there. So they've saved, it's much more efficiently. Instead of like wasting 30 minutes or an hour to do it, it just takes a few seconds. And then we're unlocking a lot of value on reporting and on like mass analytics. So traditionally customers and companies have like thousands of contracts, not a handful. And if they want to do any kind of reporting on their corpus of documents or of contracts, they even have to wait so long, engage outside counsel, have a team of paralegals go read everyone and summarize it in a spreadsheet and then report on it. Or they're going to have to sample. So they're going to take, you know what, it's impossible. We're going to like read all 10,000. I'm just going to pick a random sample of 5%, or maybe take the most important ones and ignore all the rest. But with AI, you can literally now run the AI models on all 10,000, get the report with 90% accuracy. So instead of like having 5%, you're now up to 90%. This unlocks a lot of things that were impossible before the AI. Now, like you literally can answer questions that you didn't have the answer to before, and it can really impact how you're running your business. And it impacts both bottom line and top line. So this is what I work with my business team on explaining these things to the users.
When you think about what Lexion does and what it does with AI, how do you measure the success of AI in your business? When you were just talking there, I thought about time saving. How much time are we saving? But what do you measure for success?
We measure exactly that. So we measure kind of two key things. We measure efficiency. So if you can do the job without the AI in an hour, or now with the AI do it in 5 minutes, so like you get, I've saved so much time, right? So on average, we see our AI make people around 20x faster. So this is a very measurable thing. And then there's like new value that was just even impossible. So you don't even have a baseline. You don't have like the 1 hour metric to compare against. But now like they have this report where they will never miss a renewal of a contract ever again. So even if they were like really good at carefully tracking their big contracts and know when to reach out to their customer or to their vendor to auto renew it correctly, now they can actually not miss a single one. And in not missing any single one, it's really impacting their key business metrics as well. So we measure these two things. Some of them are quantitative, some are qualitative. We talk to customers a lot, and we're always building kind of like new insights and then measuring how much engagement we're getting from users and how they are receiving them.
When you're thinking about, maybe I want to become an engineer, software developer that focuses in this AI world, it sounds interesting to like prototype things, or like maybe you get to work on really, interesting lab projects. What's the difference between doing stuff in a lab with AI versus it being out in production in the wild, having to solve business use cases?
It is very, very different. And this is like a shock that a lot of people in academia and research hit when they try to industrialize the AI. Building you can very quickly get like a Jupyter notebook, a very famous machine learning tool, and like grab the big model, write 2 lines of code, and then you have like a cool experiment where you can like ask questions to the AI and get answers, and oh, that's cool. Getting from there to production is incredibly hard. You need a lot of infrastructure and machinery. You need to kind of like have training infrastructure, annotation infrastructure, deployment, etc. I can speak about that later, but a lot of investments. And then also working in a lab setting is very different because you can have a cool experiment, but once you put it in the wild, in the hands of real users, it might fail miserably. So in the early days for Lexion, it's hard to get good contracts. So we got very scrappy on like getting some data sets from like public records and like talking to cities and governments because they have to make their contracts public.
Right.
Models that performed really well on them. Then we showed it to a company. And it didn't work as well because the shape of the data is very different from like government procurement to like enterprises. So it's very important to experiment in the lab and get customer eyes on the data and on the results sooner so that you don't build all this machinery I explained and deploy it to find out that it's not really solving the problem.
I think it's good to talk about now, like what does a technical setup and processes look like for production grade AI? Like how are you set up today? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is the area that excites me the most. Actually, I really like productionizing machine learning models. It really starts with the data. At the heart of any AI, you need good, high quality data, well-curated data. So you have to start by like having very good data tracking systems where you can build data sets rigorously, like have your training sets, your development sets, your test sets, your blind sets. Make sure that you can track which data came from who, from which customer, from annotation, from which kind of annotation. So data management is a very big part of it. And then later, you will also need a lot of specialized annotation tools. So there are generic annotation tools that will get you maybe 80% the way there. But for your own vertical domain, you will want to build very specialized annotation tools that makes your team very efficient at it. Then the next step is training. You want to have a training infrastructure to actually train the models. This can become very expensive if you're not careful, like literally in dollar amount. Like our AWS bill can easily grow into huge amounts if we're not careful and efficient. So you have to build this machinery. Then comes inference, which is kind of like now you train the model, let's glue it into the user-facing application and start showing predictions of the AI. And then the last piece that connects all this, well, there's observability and metrics. So you have to kind of like monitor how the model is doing, how often it's getting the right thing, how often it's getting the wrong thing, is there model drift, what's the confidence, and like pump this data back into your training system so that you can use it in improving the next iteration. There's a lot of like hidden parts, like kind of like in traditional software development, in machine learning, you have to worry about version control. You need to be able to deploy a model and roll it back if it has a problem. And computer software engineering has evolved a lot in these aspects. Now we all have like great version control and telemetry. Machine learning is still more nascent in these things. So we're still figuring it out and stitching a lot of tools together and trying to have the same caliber of tooling. And then the last thing in this pipeline is the user experience. So I think it's part of the pipeline. You can have great model, but if you're not surfacing the AI and predictions to the users in a consumable and easy to understand and explain way, nobody's going to use it. So a lot of people build all of this because it's exciting and ignore this important last piece and end up failing because of that.
That's super interesting. The thing that's catching my interest the most is I guess, the confidence level in the AI. Is it actually working? Is it not working? That's where I would personally focus the most, because to me, that's the value of it. How do you measure if it's working or not working? Is it qualitative? Meaning, do you ask the lawyers, like, was this correct? Or how do you know?
You have to do both.
Yeah.
So you do it quantitatively by having like good hidden blind data sets that nobody ever in the machine learning team looks at, that is kind of like agreed upon by the users, and you measure how far are you from that. This is the quantitative way, sorry. But you still have to do it qualitatively, because you have to ask the user, like, what's your intuition? Like maybe your numbers are really good. Maybe your like F1 score and precision and recall and accuracy are all like above 90%, but it's not being perceived as correct because maybe you have the wrong UX or the wrong schema, or like you're surfacing it in a confusing way, or maybe surfacing the right answer, but not showing the user why, so they can't really use it. Like one thing we learned is that if you show the prediction without highlighting the text that led you to make this prediction, is as good as not having the prediction at all. So you still have to do this qualitative analysis alongside the quantitative one.
For your team, I'm interested in the different, let's say, I don't know, how do you think about it? Do you have like an AI team, or like, what are the different roles that a software engineer that's interested in even like working on your team, what are the different roles available? I assume not everyone is doing everything.
Yeah, everybody does a little bit of everything, but there's specializations for sure. So we have like data scientists or like researcher types who are spending most of their time doing modeling and experimentation. These are people with typical like academic backgrounds, like masters or PhDs in the field of like ML and NLP. And then you have your what we call ML engineers. These are software engineers, could be generalists or really experienced in it, but they basically building a lot of tooling around AI, like building pipeline, building annotation tools, building infrastructure. We have also data engineers. These are people who are just really good at scaling data problems. So once your training set grows beyond a certain size, or the number of models grows beyond a certain size, you have to like think about how are you going to scale this in a cost-effective way across either like horizontally or vertically, or a mix of both. This is very common. And then there's two more roles. One of them is just typical application developers, like full stack engineers who can work on building the actual beautiful experiences for annotation and exposing predictions. And there are just like good product managers who are kind of like, for them, the unit of work instead of a feature, it's a model or an extraction. So a typical product manager will like build a new UI feature or like ship some or a backend API, but a typical PM for a machine learning team will decide what is the user interested in learning from their data. What is the schema for it? How do I like transfer this knowledge from the expert, from the customer to the annotation team, and make sure that the data science team is working on it correctly, etc.
The PMs in that situation, do they come from a software developer background, or are they traditional like product people that moved into the field?
I think it can be both. I've seen this happen successfully both at Lexion and in prior careers. I think the most important thing is that they have to be very good at understanding customers. So to instill this feedback back into the team, and then really good at like analytics and understanding of language so that you can design a schema. So like, it's kind of like designing an ontology or like, or what exactly, how do you, like machines at the end are working with data and schemas. Humans are working with concepts and ideas. So they have to be just really good at transforming one to the other. And they have to have like good, just like general PM, like they have to be good at writing a spec and good at communications and managing the project all the way from like inception till deployment, like typical PM stuff.
And is there any that usually in developing a product, there's kind of natural tensions or conflicts that can arise between these different roles? Is there any conflicts that you see between maybe, I don't know, like the model builders versus a different role?
There could be for sure. I honestly haven't seen it at Lexion specifically because we're a small team and we're all very close to the customer. I can see it happening when you have like a much bigger organization. Yeah. Now like the data modelers are like 4 steps away from the customer and there's like this agreement. But today, just because we're all one team and like very close to the use case, and our team is just very business savvy and always focused on adding value. So at the end of the day, we ask ourselves, what's the right thing for the customer? And the answer is usually very easy. And if we're not sure, we go and ask like a few internal or external customers directly and find out to resolve that conflict.
When you're thinking about the AI and it's surfacing information about a legal document, and it might find, 9 out of 10, it might, 90%, I don't know if you would say confidence rating, or it did its job 9 out of 10 times. And then you probably have competitors and maybe they're working at, it works 7 out of 10 times. Like, how much of a gap is that? Or how do you think about that, both from a technology and business perspective?
This is a huge gap. It might sound small on paper, but it's huge for two reasons. The first reason is practical. If somebody comes with you with 1,000,000 pictures of dogs and cats, and you have two models, one that's going to get 90% of them correctly and one 70%. So the one that gets only 70%, a human will still have to look at 300,000. So you made a dent of the problem, but baking the model into your process is expensive. So unless the ROI is huge, it sometimes is not even worth to use AI. You know what? If I'm going to look at 300,000, instead of taking the dependency on this mysterious black box, I'll just gonna do the whole million. But now do 90% of them correctly, and now the human has to only do 100,000. This is an order of magnitude improvement from 1,000,000 to 100,000. It starts clicking, and there's something here. It's probably worth me taking the time to integrate AI into my process and to reap these benefits. This is the practical consideration. There's also the psychological consideration. We just found in practice, if a user is looking at a model and it's getting 4 answers wrong or 3 out of every 10, they quickly lose trust. And they start having doubts. Oh, so they got 4 wrong. Do I really trust it with the other 6 or 7? Should I now go and check everything? I'm actually not sure I want to use this AI thing. I don't really trust it. But if you have 1 wrong in every 10, users are starting to, this is magic, really. It's great. It got this one wrong. But also when this happens, it's usually the one that your model got wrong is wrong for a reason. It's usually very hard. So the user will justify it. They're going to look at it. Oh, I can see why the model got it wrong. There's weird handwriting. There's the full scan. There's a coffee stain on the picture. I feel you, model. Okay, it's fine. Let's move on. So this psychological factor can be very impactful in whether the user will adopt your model or not.
For the psychological factor, what is the bar where they lose trust or gain trust?
It's problem specific. Some things there's very little margin of error. So if you're gonna tell them some important legal insight, you'd better either get it right, or they're gonna they expect very high accuracy. Otherwise, it's just not worth the risk for them. But you know what? If you're extracting maybe the counterparty name, and sometimes you get it right, but sometimes you forget part of the name. So instead of saying Coca-Cola Inc., you just say Coca-Cola. It's not the end of the world. They can still kind of use it. And if you miss it, they can easily fix it. There isn't a huge risk factor involved. So it really depends on the problem itself. And that's why it's key to understand the potential accuracy of your model and then go after the right problem.
And when you're thinking about, I guess, the pipeline or the cost, what does it look like to set up, I guess, a data pipeline that's useful with AI? And how do you think about the cost for your business of that?
It's a big cost from an engineering perspective and from a literal hardware cost. A lot of the cloud providers, we're in the early days of cloud and AI now. I think most people are now running normal non-ML workloads in the cloud. We're still not there with AI. So all the cloud providers are offering platforms, but they're very early and they don't solve, they're very generic, and you still have to build a lot of customized tooling for your own domain. So the cost is still very high. You have to still kind of understand your problem and probably write a lot of custom tooling, or at least stitch a lot of open source together in an awkward way. And it takes time to get this right. The pipeline is also, in our field of document understanding, it's not one model. When you take a big document, you do a lot with it. First, you have to OCR it, you have to segment it, you have to classify different sections, you have to kind of split it into agreements. Sometimes a single PDF have multiple contracts within it. You have to drop noise, remove headers, remove footers. You have to have a lot of models extract key pieces. So think about something as simple as, I want to understand if a contract is active or inactive. Even to answer this very simple question, you have to go get, when did the contract start? How long is its term? Is it going to auto renew, or is it a fixed term, or is it perpetual? If it's going to auto renew, for how many terms? How long is everyone? Who has the right to terminate? You have to extract all these things, and then you can answer the very simple question of active or inactive. You get the final date, and then, if it's in the future, it's active. If it's the past, it's inactive. Now imagine how many models you have to build for more sophisticated things. I'm starting with a very simple example. So to build like hundreds of models and orchestrate them together and have them like take dependencies on each other, you have to have a fairly sophisticated data pipeline where you can kind of like version every node of this graph I explained and version the inputs and the outputs and be able to deploy, train parts of it, train all of it, and do all that kind of cool stuff.
Thanks for walking us through, kind of how you think about it and the team setup and some of the challenges with costs. There's a lot to unpack there. I'm going to move us on to another topic around making customers happier through AI. I've heard you say before, I don't think the customers care at all about AI. They care about solving the actual problem and getting better at their job. What do you mean by that?
Not everybody agrees with me, although I do agree with that sentence very much. I agree I said that. Essentially, customers will talk to you about AI at the they're gonna take the meeting because AI is attractive and shiny and they're like intrigued. But once you pass this level, at the end of the day, business users want to solve business problems. If you're not like solving the problem, AI or not, it doesn't matter. And they don't really care if you're solving the problem with AI or have an army of people actually doing the work behind the curtains and calling it AI. You know what? As long as you're solving the problem, great. Yeah. What they do care about is the constraints that exist with the problem. So having a huge army of people solving the problem behind the curtain is going to be very expensive because payroll will be expensive. It's going to be very slow because humans are not as fast as machines. It has very serious privacy considerations because customers don't want random people all over the world looking at their data and their contracts, the most sensitive documents in their company probably. And then finally, accuracy is going to fluctuate a lot because users are going to fluctuate. If you have like an expert human in the pool of people answering, they might have great answers and then they go on vacation, somebody else comes in and then the quality drops. Machine learning models are very deterministic. Computers are just always going to give you the same consistent answer. So basically AI solves these 4 problems. It's fast, it's cheap, it's accurate, and it doesn't have biases and won't leak your information ever. So customers are very happy about solving the problem with this kind of solution space.
You've also spoken about the difficulties of retrofitting AI back to a problem once the AI is already built. Can you talk to us about that concept?
100%. It's very hard. It's not impossible to retrofit, to like sprinkle the AI on an existing applications. I've seen it done. I've worked in teams that did it. I've seen the pain of doing it. The reason is, once you build an experience without a product without AI, you just are missing some key UX constructs that make it very hard to now plug in the AI. For example, if you have an existing system with like fields and you now want to populate the fields with AI, you might not have the right data model to do that. You probably don't have the right data model to capture user feedback. So maybe you have the field value, but you don't have the field confidence. Maybe you don't have a way to capture when the user goes and changes the value to plumb it back to your training system. Also, if you were used on the humans like going and editing the value and putting a field with data entry without AI, then you probably didn't build all the machinery on exposing the reason and explaining where the value came from now that you plugged the AI. So kind of like going back and building all this UX and working on one of the most critical pieces of an AI system, which is taking the feedback data back from users to your machine learning platform, is a huge undertaking. It's so much better if you kind of like know that you're going to use AI and then build the experience around it. It can save you years of investments.
If I'm in a situation that I'm working at a company that's been around for a long period of time, or the product is actually fairly successful, and I am asked, okay, this AI thing, it's totally happening. Engineers, go figure it out. Go apply it to our product. What would you do in that situation to make it, as efficient as possible to get the AI up and running and do something positive for the product?
Yeah, I would love to be in these shoes, although I realize practically a lot of people find themselves in this situation. I think I would try to have people work in 2 tracks. I'll have people try to work on the models, but in parallel, I'll have people like redesign the UX and kind of like try to bridge this gap so that you don't end up, what happens in practice, they now spin off like a very sophisticated, capable machine learning team. They go and like work on great models, but then it takes forever to plumb them together. So I will, instead of doing that, make sure that we're making progress on both like redesigning all of our UX and have this feedback loop operational, updating all our data models, all our pipelines, and in parallel to kind of like having data scientists actually train neural networks and like decision trees, etc. You can't do just one of them.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I think I was watching a little clip of Steve Jobs talking about products and that type of thing. He said something like, it always goes poorly if you have an interesting technology. So you have a cool technology and then you just apply it to a product. That always goes badly because you're doing it in the opposite way.
Correct.
So like going off of advice, which I think is true, I think like the first thing I would do is say, really, what problem are we trying to solve? And then does AI actually fit into this instead of the other way around?
100%. And this is something we do a lot. We call them Wizard of Oz studies. So before writing a single line of AI, build the right UX that assumes the AI and have some wizards like humans behind the curtain pretend they're AI as a very cheap like A/B test. Experimental environment, try it out, see if it's resonating. And then once you make sure that this is working okay, then you know that you can go and build the AI next.
So there's maybe two different types of companies that are maybe utilizing AI. You have these big companies, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and then you have cool up and coming, startups like your company. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones doing stuff with it. What do you see as the differences? Like, what are these big companies doing with AI versus, maybe the smaller startups?
I think big companies, they have huge resources and they can attract very, very good talent, AI talent. They're just inherently really good at solving generic, broad platform type products. Like these companies are motivated not to go after a single use case. They are like want to build like a shared reusable model that plugs into hundreds of use cases. Going back to my OCR example, a big company is probably better off like making a few cents doing OCR on like every single document that gets OCR on the planet versus like creating like dollars on a much like smaller slice of like the market within a certain vertical. So their like DNA is about like scale. And I want to build like the platform. I want to enable other developers to come and build experiences on my platform. I'm not like gonna go spend time and hire like a dedicated expert team in every vertical and go do it. I am seeing a shift. Like I'm starting to see like, for example, AWS now is going into like medical NLP. So this is an interesting shift. I know that other cloud providers are starting to do like some like lightweight specialized AI experiences, but it's still very nascent. And I don't think they go too deep enough for it to like offer an end-to-end solution. Somebody still has to build on top. Startups, on the other hand, are really good at like solving the problem all like vertically all the way. They can kind of like, instead of like building a platform, you can do this as a startup. Like, how are you going to make the money? You need the revenue. You basically need to start building something that's showing traction and value very quickly. You need it for survival, really. If you build a platform and wait for like some other startup to come and build on top of it, then you're putting all of your fate in somebody else's hands. So you have this very strong motivation to go in and actually understand as a domain, ideally a big enough domain. You don't want to be locked in a small market or a very niche market either, but you want to have like a substantial domain where you can go so deep in. And this is just not going to be attractive for like the big type companies. Let them like do the heavy machinery. Sure. Let's delegate. Like, I don't want to be in the business of like building like very low level ML platforms. If a cloud provider can give me something I can use, I will happily use it and give them part of my pie. That's fine. Unfortunately, they're not there yet. Like we evaluate it every year and we still end up having to build our own stuff. I think they will eventually get there and they'll be really good at it. But yeah, as a startup now, we just have to kind of like go deep and go specialized.
That totally makes sense to me. I like to try to ask kind of like an interesting question or just a fun, question for you, Emad. If you're able to decide, would you rather be the founder of a company in the early days of computers or early days of the internet, or would you rather be a CEO of a unicorn company in modern times now?
I love that question. I think my answer to that question will change during like different points in my career. I'm at this early stage in my career still where I read your question as do you prefer like wisdom and learning, or do you prefer like riches and influence? I'm at a point where I really appreciate learning and like wisdom more. I want to learn. I want to get my hands dirty. I really, really enjoy building products and teams and like working with customers and being like part leader, but also part individual contributor and like building stuff with my hands. I'm at that stage. I also think it's essential to do these things to get eventually to potentially becoming like a CEO of a unicorn. Of course, I'm not a fool. I completely would love to do that as well. I think at a later stage, I would really enjoy to kind of like now if I have the wisdom, let me take it and have huge influence and huge impact on the world, and hopefully someday even legacy. CEOs of unicorns can kind of like really achieve a lot. They have a lot of tools at their disposal. Their decisions can like make the world a better place and impact millions of people. So yeah, and in short summary, I think now I prefer to be a founder of a startup. Maybe in 10 or 20 years, I would very much love to be a CEO of a unicorn or even like a Fortune 500 company. Who knows?
It's interesting. I was thinking about this last night when I was doing some prep for the pod and what I would rather be. I'm leaning towards kind of the early days of computers or early days of the internet versus kind of a unicorn CEO now. It could be that my opinion's a little bit shaded because of some recent things that are happening, but it seems like early on, it was kind of more about innovation or discovering something new with computers, or, getting more common people even just access to the internet or computers. And it's a little more creative and a little more good-hearted to me. Some of the things that you see now, and you'll see like all these like Netflix documentaries about it, like to be a unicorn CEO. How many times can I get someone to come onto my social media platform and sell that you're like selling addiction, or how, like I was saying earlier in the episode, like how many ads can I serve up that's the right? And it seems like a little bit less good-hearted. So for me, it would be a little bit more of that inventor type in the earlier days, if I had to say.
Completely agreed. Yeah, this is a very great way to look at it as well. And I do agree with you.
The last area that I wanted to talk to you about, and this has been, I really appreciate you coming on here and talking to us about AI and talking to us about what you're doing at Lexion and your career journey. If there's engineers out there listening to this pod and they wanted to be like you and kind of get into this field of AI, what do you think is the best way to kind of break through into the field?
There's been a lot of great tools now, open source. Like there's a course, like you can go to like fast.ai. OpenAI has a lot of courses. Coursera. It's like there's no shortage of material. I really kind of, if it's somebody with like a computer engineering background, there's a lot of coursework out there that helps you bridge the gap and get into like pragmatic and practical machine learning. And then you can go a lot deeper later if you really enjoyed it. So that's what I encourage people to do. Get into like one of these kind of like machine learning for coders type solutions. And if you end up liking it, because you might not like, I mean, it's a very compelling field, but it has its challenges. You have to enjoy math and be really have a certain skill set. If you like it, then yeah, I mean, go all in. You can start like getting a PhD or something later, or build a startup in the field, which will also be a great way to learn.
And, thank you for that advice. I know kind of related to it, you're doing some hiring, hopefully on your team in particular. What do you got going for career opportunity at Lexion?
We have a lot of very exciting roles. So we're hiring like in every part of the engineering team. So we need like full stack application developers to build beautiful experiences. We need people who want to work closer to the ML. We want people who kind of like glue the systems together, like really good back-end engineers, front-end engineers. We're really hiring for like all your typical roles right now, because we are in a growth phase and our customer base is growing and have a lot of demands. My immediate goal is to kind of accelerate model development, but also accelerate application development. So full stack engineers, ML engineers are the core two key areas.
Okay, awesome. So, anyone listening, if you are interested in a new opportunity with Emad, got some good stuff going, we'll include some links. Also, a quick reminder for our listeners, if you haven't already rated and reviewed the podcasting app of choice, particularly Apple Podcasts, please do so. The reviews are very important for us getting discovered. Also, be sure to join the Dev Interrupted Discord community. That's where we keep this type of conversation going all week long. I also want to say thank you to the more than 2,000 of you who are now subscribed to our weekly interruption newsletter. We bring you articles from the community, inside information, weekly pods, and also very important, the first look at Interact 2.0 on April 7th, 2022. Again, we'll include all the information in the links below of what we talked about today. And Emad, one more thank you to you. Thanks for coming on the pod today.
Thank you so much, Dan, and the whole team. It was really a pleasure talking, and I appreciate you having me.